Beast Kingdom, a company I know very little about, and even further, a company I've never bought collectibles from before. So this is going to be a first time for me. We're going to be checking out the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Batman figure. Yes, this is the Batman v Superman Batman, product code DAH-001 from their 1/9 scale action figure line. So I guess before we do anything, let's figure out how tall Batman stands. He's approximately 7 3/4 of an inch. He's very close to being an 8-inch tall figure. For his display stand, he gets this pretty cool looking Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice stand. Very shiny, very black, and very small actually. In fact, it actually only fits just enough to clear his feet, and that's about it. I guess for museum displaying, you really don't need a stand that much bigger. But if you ever want to do Batman in a more dynamic pose, this stand may be a little too small for your liking. It does have the Batman v Superman crest along the top and front placard of Batman featured on the front, and does have a clear adjustable neck. Now it's really only for the purpose of standing him, because really there's not much you can do with the stand. Sure, yes, you can rotate it. You can also hinge the stand back and forth with a really nice clickety ratcheted joint attaching it. So it's not gonna be flopping around for you. Here it does get a little more on the looser end. The waist clip, if you will, does rotate, and it does hinge back and forth. There is no secondary adjustment here. I mean, you can bend this and you can hinge this, but there's not really anything to the point where you can have him, say, in a flight pose. In fact, actually, when you put the figure onto the stand, the waist clip, and why I called it a waist clip, fits really exactly on his waist. There's no other wiggle room you could really do for it. So ultimately, Batman is more intended to be here displayed as a museum piece, as a museum stance, which is basically just having the figure standing straight up, than doing anything creative really with him. Now, as for the figure itself, I have to admit, I'm pretty impressed. I was also really impressed with the price. The price on this guy, granted that's Canadian prices, but this guy was $69.99 here in Canada. I got him at my local comic book store. Now, you may think that's relatively high, but if you compare it to, say, the likes of other high-end collectibles like the Play Arts Kai releases and the SH Figure Art releases, those figures go from $89 here in Canada to about $120. So to find this guy and the armored Batman, which I also picked up for a reasonable $69.99, I actually even had to ask the shopkeep if that price was correct. I didn't obviously want to get it to the counter and realize he had made a mistake, and some arguing and bickering would probably be going back and forth. So I did ask him. He says, yeah, that's the price, $69.99. So what does $69.99 here, of course, in Canada, what does that get you? Well, actually, again, I'm really surprised. It's a really nice looking Batman. In fact, there may be some debatable comments down below. I may even say, next to the Hot Toys, which I would put near the top for its likeness level, I may actually even put the Ben Affleck Beast Kingdom release here as the next closest representation of Batman. And we've gotten, of course, a very wide range, wide scale of different releases of this guy, all the way from the very bottom tier Mattel releases to things such as the Hot Toys. So along the way, and even comparing this, say, for example, to NECA, I think this is a better looking figure than NECA's release of Ben Affleck. Now, his, of course, was the 1/4 scale, but I think this is the best plastic representation that we've gotten of Ben Affleck Batman here. Bold statements one would make. Well, let's have a look at his face. Now, his face actually is really nicely done. I probably have said nicely far too much in this review. But in all honesty, it holds true. I do really think this is a good head sculpt of him. Not only is the head sculpt dead on, but I feel also that the paint delivers, which could have also abandoned all hope for the sculpt to be good if the paint was abysmal. And I have to admit that the paint is really good on Batman here. They've even gone as far as to put like the little airbrushed stubble in his face, around the mouth area here. Skin tone is more of a darker tone, I would say, than pale, so it fits well for Batman here. But that's a really good head sculpt. Especially like the sunken in areas of his eyes. Of course, wearing the cowl, his eyes would be further back, and it does give him this sense of depth. Whereas other releases I've seen of him, it looks like the eyes are painted, but not quite really recessed. Here, I think it does things quite well. The cowl, surprisingly, is a different color than the rest of his cape. Now, his cape is almost kind of more of a darker gray, whereas the cowl seems more of a shinier, almost semi-glossed black plastic. I don't think it's a detriment at all. In fact, the slight varying colors actually work well because you can then see the distinct cutoff from where the cowl stops and where the cape starts. So head sculpt, really good. Cape, equally done well. Actually, you know what? While we talk about the cape, let's flip it around. The cape is a wider spread cape, which normally I'm not super keen on because it does really kind of say right off the bat, okay, that's how the cape has to be posed. There's not much you can do above and beyond that. I suppose you could heat the cape slightly if you wanted to warp the cape inward, but the cape is always going to have a distinct spread curl to it. They've dirtied the bottom of it, as we've seen with other Batfleck releases. Here we've got the almost like off gray, off brown color that they've painted at the bottom tips there, just to make it look as if the cape is dirty. The texturing is actually rather impressive because it gives you that sense that it's almost like a faux leather. You can see the close-up look at that. So very nice. Soft, yes. Pliable, not so much, unless you heated the cape, and then you'd be able to probably bend that a little bit more, which I'm not going to really worry about too much. The body very much reminds me of a Play Arts Kai release because it's very sectional, which I guess could be a deal breaker for some, as you know, components such as, say, wrists, such as shoulders, and such as legs, you may at times find very noticeable gaps between like the leg, the thigh area, and the lower torso, or like the hand from the rest of the forearm. There's what seems to be a non-fixable gap. There's always going to be that little bit of peg gappage. You can see the hand attaches. Doesn't seem to be a way around that. At the very least, the shoulders, I mean, if you do notice a big noticeable gap, like the shoulders are intended to be brought out, or at the very least the arms are intended to be brought out, so you have a more broader range of motion. You can remedy this by pushing the shoulder in slightly, and it helps kind of fill that in so it doesn't look as bad. The legs, also the same idea. But you may find yourself doing this a lot with the figure, kind of always pushing limbs back in. Same thing also with his torso. Everything about the guy is very sectional. It's fixable, but I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to drive you bananas doing it. He's also got a hinge in the elbow, which you do unfortunately then see a discoloration between the plastic of the joint and then the plastic of the rest of the sculpt in the bicep and the forearm. Again, not considerable deal breakers for me, because at the trade-off of all of that, you get a really fantastic looking sculpt on Batman here. Even the smallest, and I don't even say smallest because it's very noticeable details, the sculpting both on the bat emblem as well as, of course, the rest of this outfit, even right down to the fact that they've got the little seam lines there sculpted in as well. Now, because everything is sectional to this guy, ultimately things such as his utility belt sit a little on the floppy, loose side. There's not really much you can do about it. If they had permanently, say, adhered it, like glued it to the lower torso, which could be a fixable means as well, it may limit a little bit of posability. Like I could, if I glued this, for example, down, because say I was being driven crazy by the fact that this moved around as much as it did, I suppose in theory I could still move the torso, so it's not limited there. Why they didn't just glue it in place, I guess because they did want to have it so that you would have as much range of motion to them as you possibly could. But again, gluing that in place, it doesn't seem as if that would be any bit of a detriment to the figure's mobility. You could still seem as if you would be able to move it completely. Detailing on his legs as well as his boots. You got that little bit of gold added to the foot area. It's a little sloppy, I will admit it. It's almost as if they didn't even know where to stop it. It started here, but then they just carelessly airbrushed the whole outer tip. It's a small gripe, but it's something, again, you at the very least would want to point out in this review. Sculpting on the undersides of his soles, very nicely done. Yeah, not a bad looking Batman at all. For whatever nitpicks I have, at the very least, my nitpicks would only be for the fact that the joints seem like they could really detach too often from one another, leaving big noticeable gaps. That's a really small complaint for all the other cool things that this guy does possess. Speaking of possessing, this guy possesses a lot of accessories as well. We'll kind of go through each and every one of them. First things first, he does come with his grapple gun. I looked at the handle of the gun and it seemed as if it was too light. The longer I look at that, the same feeling I have. It does look like it's light. It should be a little bit of a darker brown. Instead, they give it almost this kind of caramel color, which I don't think is quite the coloring, but I'm willing to dismiss that. Nice detailing sculpt there on the barrel and the chamber at the top. There is a hole in the front there where you can take his little hook, and the hook just pegs into place. Fairly secure. I mean, I suppose you could, it's not going to fall out of place. If you also want to get a little creative too, you can take this out, and he does come with the line, the actual grapple line. Simply just, you're just going to take the same sized plug, plug it into the end like that, and then the other end has the hole, and you're just going to attach the hook to that, just like that. It's not a wire though. It doesn't look like you can really manipulate it and bend it. So ultimately, unless you're using like a fishing line or something where you're going to keep it airborne, the grapple line is just going to basically droop down from the grapple gun if you have him holding it in his hand. The other thing that he comes included with is his kryptonite grenade gun. And while there isn't anything working on it, there's no moving components to it, they've given a really nice scratched airbrushing to it, like dry brushing. You can see like little areas where the silver has now started showing through as the gun has had some considerable wear done to it. Again, nothing really works, nothing moves on it, but not to say that anything would really need to move on it, nor does he come with any actual grenade canisters. This is a topic of debate because some would say, well, if he comes with the grenade gun, wouldn't it make logical sense that he comes then with the actual kryptonite grenades? Not really, because if there's a hole in the end in which the grenade can sit inside, well, you're always going to be displaying it with the grenade inside. If you can display it loose, you may necessarily want to just display him almost as if he's putting the grenade in. So, I mean, again, if you were upset that he doesn't come with the grenade, I'm so sorry for that. And then he also comes with a series of batarangs. Now, looking at the batarangs, I thought that they might have been different from one another, but I'm looking at them and they look like they're all similar. They look like they have all the exact same sculpt. You can see right there. They don't look like they share any... Well, they all share the same sculpt. It doesn't look like there's any differences between them. I thought they might be metal. I think, in fact, they are plastic. And you can fit them either into his hand or really just don't display him with it. Entirely up to you. And then lastly, he comes with a series of interchangeable hands. Now, the hands currently in the sockets are the same hands that I got with him when I got him out of packaging. I haven't changed any of the hands or anything like that. But he does come with a series of different interchangeable hands, a pair of relaxed palms, you know, if you want to do it with that. And then he's got a series of different gripping hands. And again, those gripping hands could be used for example, the grapple gun. Now the grapple gun, you kind of have to, let me just show you, you have to kind of wedge around his fingers. There's not a lot of wiggle, and you'll hear probably a lot of squeaking and creaking as you're getting into his hand, but at the very least, it's secure. It's not going to go anywhere. And then he also has a couple of interchangeable hands that can hold, say, for example, the batarangs. And again, they sit securely. It's not going to be a case where they sit loose and they're going to fall out of his hands. To change out any of the hands, just grab the figure, grab the forearm here, and you're just going to pop it out like that. I suppose of all the things that are sectional on this guy, I'm probably the most bothered by the fact that there's a big gap between his hand and his forearm. Everything else is fixable, but it's like the hand is always going to have this big gap, as you can see right there. It's just the nature of the way that the ball joint works. The ball joint's here and here, and then there's the connecting rod between the two. There's really no way that I can see that you can actually push this in any further. So yeah, you will see a big gap between the two. At the very least, that's the only complaint I have with this figure. Everything else, like I said, everything else is fixable. You know, the arms can be brought in a little bit more, so if there's the gap that's bothering you that much, I mean, the arms, like I said, can come out, and you see a big slot in between. But it's not going to be enough, especially the fact that you can push the arms back in. It's not going to drive me really that crazy. Okay, so let's have a look at his posability. His head rotates all the way around. You got the hinge up and down. I suppose you could rock the head back and forth as well. Arms rotate all the way around. You also get the benefit of having the arms detach slightly from the torso, so you get that little extra wiggle room to work with. You got the bicep swivel. A lot of things on this figure creak, which I guess not necessarily is a bad thing. I just want to bring it to your attention. He's got a double hinge on the elbow. Boom, boom. And then he's got, again, the rotation in the hand happening. Ball joint there, giving you two ball joints. That's math, simple math. Upper torso ball joint. He also has the lower torso ball joint / waist swivel, because it really functions both ways. And then you've also got the same thing with the legs as you do with the shoulders. So the legs move forward and back, out, out. But then you can also detach the leg, giving you some extra clearance. If you want to bring the leg a little further out, you could do that. And then just remember to kind of pop it back into place. And even after you've popped it in place, you may have to just kind of adjust the legs until you get as little of a gap as you possibly can get. He does also have a swivel. Mid-cut of the thigh is that swiveled happening there. Double hinge on the knee. He has absolutely nothing in the foot, nothing in the boot area. But he does have a ball joint. Looks like the same thing that's happening here that happened in the wrists. You got a ball joint, and not as much of a noticeable gap, but it does look like the peg is a different color than the hands. It looks like it's actually a gray. So you have your ankle rocker, hinge back and forth, and then you have the toe articulation. One thing about the feet, though, that the hands don't seem to be as much the problem with, is that you may suffer ankle shifting. In other words, like this leg here, this foot here, sometimes because it's got a ball joint here and a ball joint here, you may find the foot slightly shifts to the side. You see that? And just for that, you just kind of push it back into place. You just kind of have to shift it back into place. But again, like little tiny small things, nothing deal breaking. As a closing thought, one thing I'm glad that this figure didn't do is some things that Play Arts Kai figures have done, and that is hingeable wings, or wings that can, or the cape can fan out. I'm glad they didn't do that. They just kept it to being one piece, which I think works better for this particular figure. There's really a lot I like about this figure, and there's very few things that I dislike about this figure. Yeah, of the things that I dislike about the figure can really only be chalked up to his articulation. Some of the joints or some of the components that make up his limbs do at times seem a little sectional or have gaps in between them. Most of the time they are fixable. Some of them, such as the ankles and the wrists, may still have the gaps, so if you can overlook that, it's really a nice looking figure. Kind of really, looking at this figure, it reminds me of something I would have gotten from a PlayArts Kai release. Just a little bit smaller, and a lot more accurate in detail to some of those PlayArts Kai releases. Yeah, I would say that this is the closest thing that I've seen for a Ben Affleck Batman, just shy of the Hot Toys release of him. And to the credit of this one, he is definitely a lot more posable, and it's a lot easier to get him in different poses than what you could with the Hot Toys release, because of course, due to the fabric outfits and stuff like that that he's wearing. I'm really, really happy with this figure. And I'm super excited to also open up the Armored Batman, which I think I'll do in the next review. Like I said about this guy and the Armored Batman, both of them are very affordable. I was very surprised to find out that both him and Armored Batman only was going to set me back at $69 to $70 a piece. So they're affordable, they're articulated to the nth degree, and unlike some of the other releases we've gotten for Ben Affleck, this looks like Ben Affleck. So kudos to Beast Kingdom. It's definitely going to be a company I'm going to look more and more to, I think, when it comes to their future collectible releases. By the way, if you are interested in picking this guy up for yourself, you should be able to find him at your local comic book stores. And hopefully, here in Canada, hopefully the price point for this guy will set you back about $69. Maybe a little bit less in the US stores. Canada tends to be a little bit more expensive when it comes to that kind of stuff. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button, the one that's just below this video, make sure you do so. Many more videos will be coming your way. You can also follow me over on Facebook, Twitter, and you can also support this channel if you wish through Patreon. And I'll put all the links down below. More videos, guys, will be coming your way. Again, we're going to be looking at the Beast Kingdom Armored Batman. That's probably going to be coming up in the next review, so stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.